profit.
RICS-Vestian present Power Talk on the future of IT parks in India.
Hello and welcome to the RICS-Vestian Power Talk on the future of IT parks in India. Well, IT industry is growing quite rapidly. In fact, in a hurry to catch up with the 7% of GDP target by 2015. And with that rapid growth comes rapid demand for IT parks and offices. So in this program, we spot the trend and tell you about the future of IT parks in India. What are the key drivers? How to create those extravagant, plush and safe office spaces. So RICS, which is world's leading self-regulatory professional body for creating qualification and standards for land, property and construction, and Vestian workplace services have joined hands to break it all down for you. Well, they conducted a comprehensive study across 15 different cities in India, and in the next half an hour, we get you the key findings. How to raise standards in the IT park construction space, how to keep up with the safety and security, and most importantly, how to deliver the project on time. Join us in this discussion.
Why the campus? Why do we? By 2015. So broadly, from a parameter perspective, we said we'll kind of evaluate the IT campuses on 5 broad parameters. The parameters were basic amenities, operation and maintenance, planning highlights, safety and security, and innovation. In terms of the sample size that we looked at, we said let's look at a campus that's already in existence for operational for the last 3 years minimum. We said a minimum of 0.8 million square feet, and it has to be a multi-tenanted building. When we look at the first parameter, which is the basic amenities, something very interesting came out. The developer industry has matured so much that they have been able to meet almost 95% of the expectations of the tenants. So the IT industry, from a basic amenity standpoint, they're right up there. The industry has actually evolved, and they are catering to the needs of the IT industry. Some key takeaways from this study was, a lot of you expect developers to provide 1 per 500 square feet in terms of car park. We believe that this cannot sustain in the long run. Eventually, at some point of time, will call for some drastic action, both from the government as well as from the developers themselves. So the second important aspect is that all of you ask for 1 kVA per every 100 square feet. You actually consume 0.6 to 0.7 kVA only. Operation and maintenance, there is no professionally managed, very few professionally managed organizations, and the skills have to be improved upon across India. Developers generally tend to keep this in-house and want to do it themselves, primarily for 2 reasons. They see this as a revenue generation, and 2, because they are unable to get the right quality manpower. And technology, hardly 10% of the IT campuses use technology as a very key element. Safety and security, and very, very important aspect, and this is one place where we lag far behind the global standards. If something happens tomorrow, I don't think we are prepared either from a terror perspective or we are prepared from a safe fire and safety perspective. Innovation, green, LEED certification, rainwater harvesting, you name it. I think most of the developers in this country across all campuses that we have seen are willing to do it, are willing to learn. The tenants are willing to pay 18.5% increase in rent if 4 basic amenities are given. It could be as simple as childcare, ATM machines, food courts. Grade A buildings generally command a 5.8% increase in rent compared to the standard buildings. End users are not willing to pay more than 1.9% for improvements, tenant improvements in terms of safety and security or innovation. Now, why would a developer who doesn't get any economic incentive from the government spend that extra piece of money, that extra money. So important takeaway, food for thought for all of us, I think in this room need to think about it and why there are ways and means how we can incentivize to get the industry go to the next level. You know, this again, and I'll quickly sum it up, collaboration, 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 unless and until the three key stakeholders, the clients, the developers, and the government are not on the same table trying to understand the needs, we will not be able to meet the 2050 deadline. So it's time that, you know, I'm looking forward to having people like RICS, who's a professional body, to actually sit down with the government, influence them, and get them to understand that this is the focus of the study and where we are today and how do we need to get there.
Thank you very much for being here. It's a real pleasure for me to moderate this session because I'm with people that I've known in this industry for many years. Just by way of introduction, for those of you, and I doubt that there are many who don't know Jaggi Mawara, Jaggi has been really the leader in the South India leasing space, primarily with RMZ Corporation. And then to my left and my right, I've got Mysore Ramesh and Captain K. Srinivas, who have international roles heading real estate for occupiers. One is Convergys and one is Aditya Birla Minax. So, and Srini, of course, who heads up the Vestian Services Organization for Asia Pacific. Thank you very much, Srini, for the intro to your study, and I think it's great that an organization like Vestian and RICS have pulled that together. I think one of the things that we've seen is this change from the single standalone building to larger, more integrated townships. And really for Srini, yourself, and for Jaggi, I wanted to get your perspective when we are looking at the future. Where do you think that's going to go?
You know, if you looked at the study, Mike, what comes out of the study is that the integrated township concept or the campus is actually commanding a premium compared to the standalone buildings. What we have seen in the 40 million odd square feet that we have looked at, almost 10 to 15% increase in terms of the rentals compared to the standalone buildings. And again, we have seen this concept of space evolving in the last 2 decades from the standalone buildings to where we are today in terms of integrated campus environments, is something that we believe that in the future is the way forward for almost all IT companies across India.
Over the last maybe under 5 years, we've seen more and more larger spaces being developed as large office spaces, and I think, but it's also got to do with the regulation. It's also got to do with what kind of FSI people are allowed, and I think from the client's perspective, it makes logical sense because you can start small and grow big. From the developer side, it works for the simple reason you don't need to build all of the stacks together. You can actually build slowly, and the only downside I would say being that, you know, you really don't have good infrastructure in any city to support large influx of people in one location.
Captain Srinivas, from your perspective, does your company have a preference to be in single standalone buildings and developments or multi-tenanted facilities?
I think it's a combination of what kind of business units you're progressively looking for the portfolio. If it is on the international side, or if it is a more tier 1 international supporting side, then you would obviously look for large campuses which are scalable and so on and so forth. But if you're looking at tier 2 markets or tertiary markets, in the absence of fully defined campuses, your choice would be limited to some extent, and this extends not just to India but also to many other countries. So as a matter of choice, we would like to go in for expandable, sustainable, and sort of settled kind of campuses. But sometimes we're out of choice.
And Ramesh, do you still go for standalone facilities or multi-tenanted?
Actually, I think from our experience and our type of business, the most preference is a standalone building because more we are dependent on the labor pool and the footfall. So if we have the multiple buildings and there are multiple occupiers, we are worried about the competitors and the people being driven away from the occupancy, this one. So we are more interested in the standalone so that we can concentrate and have labor pool concentrated and coming to our building.
For many of the facilities with like lead ratings, there was only a 1.9% uplift. There was not a propensity to pay on the part of occupiers for these types of facilities. Could you comment on what you see overseas in terms of IT campuses and whether you see a different standard, whether you see different facilities and a higher propensity to pay, or whether you have an issue with what Srini is saying, is that occupiers do indeed have the ability and willingness to pay?
Let me touch base on the LEED certification of the green buildings. In India, we have not progressed so far in the recent years. We did start in 2000 and progressed a lot till 2004, 2005. But after that, we have been on a consolidation mode. But after that, we have a lot of expansions and the new geographies like we did in Philippines, and we stepped into South America. Now, South America is just an emerging market. I would say, if you ask me simple, it's India about 8 years old. What was there 8 years back, that is the South America. When Philippines has really overtaken India and it's grown vast. From our experience, we have about 1.6 million square feet of space in Philippines, and about 25,000 we are going to reach the employees count by end of this year. And we have about 15 facilities in Philippines. We have varied buildings, but we have not come across anybody coming and pitching for a green building or LEED certification.
And I was talking to somebody in the group, and I said 8 years back, when we were looking at, sort of rating our buildings or evaluating our buildings for a major MNC, from a security and safety aspect, where were we and where we are now? I think we have sort of evolved, but I'll come to that a little later. From a green perspective, I think it's also a function of, what you see in India on a portfolio basis. You're seeing a lot of improvement in the awareness. Companies want to adopt that because they're trying to variabilize their costs. They want to offset their capital investments themselves. So we do believe that the perception of mindset is changing, but is it coming at the right points of costs or financials? I think there are some struggles still on the mind. But if you were to choose between when you're evaluating from a site selection tool, you're evaluating between buildings which are more sustainable versus buildings which are not. I think clearly not just the real estate people, but also the accountants or the financial management team, they also do seem to understand that there is an advantage over a longer period of time.
RICS-Vestian present Power Talk on the future of IT parks in India. RICS-Vestian present Power Talk on the future of IT parks in India.
Jaggi, you're one of the few people in India who's had the task of marketing a LEED rated, I think LEED Platinum building up in Calcutta, if I'm not wrong.
LEED Gold.
Maybe could you give your perspective? Was that was probably 3-4 years back, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Has anything changed and so on?
Yeah, I think like Ramesh said, I think the awareness for the environment is still not there, and it's, in my view, I think it's got to do more with the the kind of work that happens in India. I think if you raise the bar in terms of the value chain that you actually work for from the client's perspective, if your clients demand, if a Convergys client demands that being in a LEED building is very paramount to them, I'm sure you're going to come back to us and say this is a no-brainer. So I think the moment, and I think for the longest time, India has been always looked at as a cost, from a perspective of, talent. It's only in the last 5 years things have changed phenomenally. People for the longest time came to India for the cost, leveraging cost. Today, in the last 5 years, things have changed dramatically. People want to come to India just to leverage talent, not the cost. And there are many, many companies who are in India, Cisco being one of them, Oracle being one of them. Their facilities look as they would be in the San Jose or the Silicon Valley. So I think it's more to do with the clients as well as their demands and their nature of work and their commitment to sustainability.
Srini, you must be seeing, I mean, you represent a lot of occupiers, so what are you seeing from that customer drive and orientation?
Michael, the biggest change, it has to be top down. I mean, that's what the study kind of tells us. You know, if it is not top down, I mean, at Cisco, like he pointed out, I think it's a top down effort where the company at the global level has decided that this is the way forward. The problem we're having is, since India is still looked upon, and it is changing, as a cost leverage destination, you really don't see companies wanting to spend. And if you see when you actually do the deep dive on the study, on the 250 parameters that we have evaluated, tenants really are not bothered about some of the elements. They expect, I mean, the basic is enough. And when you talk about a LEED certified building or a green building and sustainability and so on and so forth, people haven't really given that much weightage in their entire evaluations.
Just to add, I'm sorry, just to add to Srini, your point, I don't know whether your report covers this in terms of whether there's a actual north-south divide in India between the quality of developments in North India and the quality of developments in South India. I don't know, but that's a starking difference.
It does actually.
And
that's one of the key
I don't know
elements.
whether, Convergys has a beautiful building
I mean,
there.
I think I'm smiling because you're throwing the grenade in for that, but that's a great point. So you've got buildings north and south, and I'm sure you have. What's your perspective on that? The north-south, is there a quality issue, a quality difference in north and south?
To be honest, to a certain extent, yes.
I think by legacy, the kind of units that are there down south, the names that we talked about drive some of these industry trends too. So, the industry around them has sort of evolved, and which is why you see it much higher here. NCR being more of a BPO destination in those years had its own wants and, limitations, whereas more from an R&D, from an IT perspective, South did have its own edge.
Sorry to tell you this, but compliance is also a very important perspective. Today, gentleman sitting there, air commoder, won't look at a building if it's not compliant. And similarly for all of you, there is a mindset, and it's a divide in India, and I would definitely say, because the first doors to the IT industry were opened in South India. So I think it just evolved, the benchmarks were raised, the expectations were set so high that you could only emulate to be in the race or be out of it.
And I think one area that I felt didn't come through strongly on that report, which I believe, when we talk about the future of business parks, is around energy costs and energy efficiency.
True, very true. And I think it's time the corporates wake up and figure out what exactly is the actual requirement from an energy perspective.
Your report came out with some findings around safety and security that was surprising to me, that there was room for improvement in that space. And maybe I can ask Captain, being an ex-military man, when you look at security aspects and when you're looking at buildings in India,
a lot of it is around the risk appetite or the risk environment of a country, right? So we've come from basically looking at something to say physical security is one aspect. Now the guys are talking about logical and surveillance and so many other things which could be, which can get to any level of speciality in many campuses. But I think the basic level of security perception, threat perception for every campus sort of, cuts across every client's requirement. That would be prospective clients. So you would have something at the perimeter, you would have an internal security cordon, you would have your detection systems is generally the norm, and most of the sites do have that.
Right. Ramesh, you're a people-intensive industry. How seriously does your organization take the whole issue around density, fire, disaster planning, disaster recovery planning, and so on? Where's that on your list of must-dos?
See, one of the things, as you rightly started off, the density is the prime thing for us. We will try to get to a building where we can get the maximum density. So when we do the maximum density, you look into all the safety and the fire regulation factors. That is the key concern for us when we do a site selection. Whether the building has been designed to take care of the exiting formalities, whether the building has enough security regulations, controls, and provisions to even put additional controls over that, and how the landlord has, developed the security control arrangement. There has been a lot of factors, improvements done in India, and the gadgets, like we have done turnstiles with card readers, To that extent, we are gone, even though we have a large number of people coming in at every shift or every hour. So we are trying to introduce all those things. But what is the difference if I compare here versus the other countries which I see? The other countries may not be so much sophisticated in terms of gadgets, but their implementation, the way they do, the dedication is, that's more than what we can see in India.
What we need to do is, I think the insurance companies also need to ensure the human resources of these organizations based on those norms. I think that is something that from a government standpoint, they should now start expecting these kind of terms in the contracts.
It would be a great thing that if we could, when we're thinking about the future of IT parks in India, if we could think back on maybe 2 or 3 golden nuggets from the last 10 years and where you see things going, so more of a forward-looking perspective.
The more I see is that when we get the people to work, the more what we hear from our operations or what they say is people need to come and work, and it should be a fun-loving and a very functional type of campus. Whatever you can do to people to make sure they stay in your campuses and be happy to work. That sort of evaluation is required.
I completely agree with Ramesh. But I think from our perspective, from a developer perspective, I think the government needs to give certain incentives to developers who can give away certain amount of land for an MRT station, for a metro station. I think if that can be done, because I think the single biggest problem today is car parking and getting it to work.
I think, Michael, we'll move away from the basic amenities. I think what will happen is that basic amenities are going to be a given. What I believe is that we will go towards technology. We're going to go towards campuses that will have osmotic scanners, will have very high levels of security going forward, and that seems to be the order of the day.
To my mind, infrastructure, I know you covered it not just at the campus level, but work inside and work outside is a 2 different level of experience for people who are coming in, and not just talking about clients, but also about employees. So infrastructure is is definitely a given as an issue. But to a point that Jaggi talked about, many parts of US and in Canada, for example, North America, they would provide from a government perspective, you would provide economic development commissions, offices to bring people or to bring employment into those locations. We don't have that problem here right now. So, there is very little incentives for governments to provide builders per se those advantages. And looking at where we are from a question of supply and demand and, which cities are growing, I think there's a problem of plenty that we have. So, you're not really asking for that kind of incentive support. But to Srini's point, I personally believe that the standards are growing all the time.
And of course, that's all part of the globalized business, that your clients are sitting in the US or all over the world, and you need to reach the standard and expectations that they want in terms of security and staff and reputation. Absolutely. Well, I think we'll wrap up on that point. But one of the things that I'm sure all 4 of us on this panel would thank you at Vestian and RICS is for putting together that report that aggregates factual data so that we are able to analyze and express opinions and plan on actions around facts, not conjecture. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah?
Thank you.
RICS and Vestian present Power Talk on the future of IT parks in India.